Welcome back, everybody, to me being mildly annoyed about the Wheel of Time. Yes, we're continuing Crossroads of Twilight. This is about chapters 11 to 16. And I'm still mostly mildly annoyed because I guess Bobby J has exhausted his well of really fucked up things to say, so I don't have new things to get pissed off about. There's still enough to be, critical on, and I'll try to explain the things that I didn't like this time around. I'll also try to explain the stuff that I maybe kind of liked, if there was some. We will see. So, time to do this, right? Well, cheers. All right. So today we'll spend most of our time in Camelin with Elaine and gang, and then we'll move to Tarvalon, because it's time to also meet Egwene, which we haven't seen for a long time. All the way since the beginning of Winter's Heart, I guess? Maybe? Or was it even before that? I'm getting confused here. We haven't seen her for a long time, is what I'm trying to say. And that's sort of what we'll talk about today. So let's look at the Elaine and General Camelin bits first. Well, it's fairly simple. We continue the general plot of this book, which is where's everyone when Rand is cleansing dick magic? So Elaine comes back. We hear about how the Sea Folk is feeling about it. We hear about how the kin and other Aes Sedai are feeling about it and what to do or not to do with it. That kind of thing. Which, yeah, sure. Fine. And then we have a conversation between Elaine and the Sea Folk that has to leave, and a conversation between Elaine and the high seats of a bunch of houses that Dylan has dragged into supporting Elaine, which, yeah, sure. And that's sort of all of what is really interesting here, apart from the fact that we learned that Elaine obviously has twins, will get twins, and yeah, stuff like that. So let's start and look at what's going on there. First thing there is Elaine's pregnancy. It is still absolutely fucking annoying. Yes, I've read the comment there about how women's pregnancies may be, but see, the problem is that it's written about first her perspective and then other people, and her being annoyed that other people take too much care of her, and I'm like, yeah, well, it just becomes too much of an annoying thing because, Robert Jordan needs to drive his themes home with a fucking sledgehammer. So every single action that Elaine is taking at this point is always filtered through the fact that she is pregnant. And, well, I'll just leave it at that. The big issue that I have today is, however, Robert Jordan coming up with shitty things that don't make any sense. So here's the big deal, right? Everyone is Elaine is we need to keep secret that these are Rand's babies, that Rand knocked me up. We need to come up with all kinds of other arguments. Possibly that asshole from the guard, what's his name, Mellar, whatever, Doran Mellar, that guy, the traitor dude. I'm going to talk about him in a second. And he knocked me up. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm like, but why? And the argument that everyone gives, including Elaine, is that if anyone would know that these were Rand's babies, they would be a target. And that's bullshit. That's absolute fucking bullshit, and Robert Jordan should be smart enough to know it. Because here's the deal, right? Elaine is trying to become Queen of Andor. Her city's under siege. There's all kinds of people who would like to see her removed, kidnapped, assassinated, or something else. She's in fucking danger no matter who the kids are, and chances of her surviving the next 9 months, or 8 months if we, calculate backwards if we try to, are highly unlikable no matter who the fucking dad is. Doesn't make any sense. And the ridiculous bit there is, there is an easy way to explain it, and that would be like if people would know that it was Rand who's the dad. Rand knocked her up. Her argument that, she needs to actually become Queen of Andor without Rand's help, because Rand, Queen of Andor is something you need to be on yourself, and she can't be seen as a puppet of Rand's, right? That argument would be enough to say, like, no one can know that I actually fuck Rand, because that would totally undermine my authority as being my own person. That would work perfectly. But we don't do that. We're talking about, they might be targets, so I'll just better come up with a lie who might be the father of those kids. Like, why? Why come up with that nothingness that doesn't hold water at fucking all? If the other one was there, the other argument, you don't use it. It's like, why? I don't get it. And it just like kind of shows once again that like Robert Jordan has this weird fascination with reproduction and with women being pregnant, or women having the ability to be pregnant, and the ability of women lying about who fucks whom. And I'm like, that's like the only thing that remains from this plot line, if you want to have that plot line in there, which, is like, why would you? And if you need to have the plotline of Elaine lying, then please make it somewhat, reasonable, because the thing you're giving me as a reason right now doesn't make any fucking sense, and I feel it's only there so you can have another woman lying about whom she's fucking. And I'm like, that's weird. We don't need that. Just like, And as I said, I don't get it. It's just dumb. And there we are. Robert Jordan is not exactly a master of politics and intrigue, unfortunately. Let's go on, though, with something that I find fascinating, because it shows up again and again. And it's not necessarily something that I can blame Robert Jordan for. I think it's a larger problem that we have with fantasy that is set at courts. And that is like a Renaissance court, which is sort of where we are with this kind of thing, Baroque to Renaissance kind of court, is a monstrosity of protocol. And reading about that stuff is boring as fuck. So it makes a lot of sense to only write scenes where we don't focus on the protocol stuff, because, it's fucking boring. It really is. Robert Jordan tells us all the time about all the fucking protocol, and then all the scenes he describes, even the ones that are supposed to be formal because they're like audiences and stuff, are absolutely fucking informal, because yes, it's boring to write about formalities. And, it's something that we've seen in other fantasy books as well. So I'm not blaming just Robert Jordan here. I'm just saying it's something that a lot of medieval fantasy does have. So yeah, having, actually writing out as scenes with conversations. Maybe only choose the stuff that is, clandestine, or two people hanging out somewhere, or whatever, where the formality doesn't play a role. But if you want to, have, the whole formal thing, then do the whole formal thing. Or give me a reason why it is not that formal right now. And Robert Jordan doesn't do that. Well, to be fair, as I said, other authors that write about courtly stuff do the same oftentimes, because it sucks. It's not exactly fun to read, and I get that. There's very few fantasy books that get the whole formality and protocol and crap right, or at least focus on it in a way where you can see where that whole thing is going. I would say maybe Gormenghast is one that kind of goes in the right direction by even overplaying it in a lot of ways. And there's more of that stuff that play with it and show how ridiculous it is. You could probably even cite Pyramids by Terry Pratchett if you really feel like it, but know what I mean. So it's not exactly me being pissed off at Robert Jordan here. I'm just with Robert Jordan not getting the problem right either, just like a lot of other authors that don't manage to do it either. All right. Let's talk about more of those kind of things. And once again, a lot of this is the whole Robert Jordan telling us one thing and then showing us a different thing. One of those is that he's explaining that the sea folk, the Athan Meir, are extremely focused on ritual and formality. But we never see that either. Like anytime they show up somewhere, they're barging in somewhere, they're ignoring guards and all of that stuff, and just like do whatever the fuck they like and get away with it. Which, once again, that's not how a formal court works. You have guards, you fucking keep to those rules, but apparently we get told one thing and then we get shown a different thing. And this is where a lot of like my I don't know, I don't want to call it dissonance, but you know what I mean, right? It comes from, it's like, that, dude, either don't bother telling me about how formal the whole thing is and just show me how you believe this thing has to go down, which, you know, makes it, well, arguably more entertaining. Or actually stick to what you claim you're doing. But we don't get either one. So, well, there we are. What else is interesting in this one? There's a long discussion. I guess there's like an interesting point there with Dylan coming back with those 4 high seats of houses, and they're all basically kids. And yeah, I don't know. It just feels like a weird scene in a way, because once again, it's all about like how unfit to do anything they are, and that's what poor Elaine has to deal with. And yeah, I know it's something we've seen in other books before, and you know, you have all of these aspects there. It just feels a bit like he's piling it on a bit too thick in a lot of ways. But yeah, well, we'll see. Apparently someone is trying to spy on Elaine and Avienda with magic, and we don't know who it is. I just really hope it'll show up again and we'll get like some sort of explanation, because otherwise I'll frankly be pissed, because he's dropping all of these things that go nowhere at all. And I mean, that's sort of like one of the reasons that I find so annoying, which, you know, ties back to the thing that I just said about like keeping it secret who that Rand is the father of Elaine's kids. Like, you better make something interesting out of it, because right now you're claiming bullshit, and it doesn't look like it's going anywhere. It's just like one of those things that's there to annoy me, and yeah, I don't know. We already have so much of that. Anyway, so that's a lot of this. Plus, you know, everyone is afraid of you know, what is going down there in the West with Rand doing the magic trick with Nynaeve. And then the magic trick stops, and then everyone's like, oh, well, what happened really? We don't know. And then there's like that bit of like one of the Aes Sedai, what's her name, Marililla, fleeing with one of the Seafolk apprentices, and I really hope something comes of that, because it feels once again like completely irrelevant. It's like, yeah, that girl went and talked to Nynaeve a couple of books ago about wanting to become an Aes Sedai. But it's like, okay, well, just more stuff happening that probably doesn't go anywhere. And I'm still afraid that we're having something of a, you know, Song of Ice and Fire issue there, where like at some point we're just adding more and more plot lines that go nowhere, and then we'll see how to actually drag all of that crap back together, right? It's like, we're already like more than halfway through book 10 of 14, and we're still building up. There's no sense of like convergence at all yet. So that might make the last couple of books feel extremely crammed, or a lot of stuff will just like go nowhere. Which, yeah, well, whatever. Really. Okay. Then there is obviously the whole like looking at the map kind of thing, and I think that's like another part there that I find in a way so weird. I mean, we still technically have that whole thing going on with intrigue, right? We still have the thing going on with like who killed Van Dien's sister, whose name I have already forgotten. So see how unimportant they are, and you can make something out of that. You could make really something fun out of it, like where the reader can try to guess who the murderer is. But because all of these, like hundreds of Aes Sedai with all names that start with A somewhere, it's like, I have like no way to find out. There's no way to find out. I'll just have to wait until Robert Lord and Savior Jordan decides to give us a scene where that becomes relevant. Until then, it'll just like be in the background. It's like, yes, one of those women that I don't care about will probably be the murderer. Until they get discovered, we'll not find out anything about it, and I frankly don't really care. We have the same thing going on with that whole fight for the crown of Andor, right? Because it's like, yeah, there's House Trakand, and then there's Dylan, which is House Terravin, probably, possibly, and then there's House Mantiar, which is the one from before, you know, with where Rand's mother comes from. And like anyone else, I don't fucking care. There's no dimension to it. There's nothing to it. We'll just have like all these names that are, pushed around. It's like, yeah, so why the fuck would I care? It's like, I have none of those informations that possibly make that discussion between, what's their names, the Dylan, Brigida, and Elaine, interesting or relevant. It's like, we'll just rattle off a bunch of names to create the illusion of complexity, but there is no complexity because they are just names. There's nothing behind it. And it's one of those big themes that we see like going wrong in the entire books. Like, Robert Jordan creates the idea of there being a world, but there is no world behind it. It's just like, I just rattle off a bunch of names and they'll never show up again. And then just something will happen. And that leads us to exactly what we see in the next chapter. That's like the chapter is like Gathering Darkness, something like that. Darkness Gathers, Gathering Darkness, Gather Darkness. Now that would be something. Great book. Y'all should go and read Gather Darkness by, Fritz Lieber, which is always an author worth reading. So read Gather Darkness. It has Satanists fighting the church. It's really cool. In spaceships. Well, not only in spaceships, but you know what I mean. Go read that one. It's way more fun than this one. Anyway, let's go to the Gather Darkness chapter, which is basically two bits. One of them is what's going on in the besieging camp with those three noble women. Yeah, three noble women. And yeah, well, there's so much wrong with that bit. And I think that's sort of where we come to like a bunch of issues. Right? So most of it is like through the perspective of, oh gods, Leanne and some noble woman who no one really cares about. I think her surname is Sundar or something like that. Who knows? As I said, they don't care. She's riding around. She's been, freed by the other one, Marililla. Not Marililla. Oh, God's sake. I can't even keep those names straight because who cares about any of them, right? Anyway, she's been those two that got like freed from like Dylan's imprisonment, and through whatever means they got forced to sign a pledge to support that other one that everyone thinks is stupid. And now here's the interesting bit. I see what Robert Jordan is trying to do there, because we get like her like thought process, and she's extremely arrogant and whatnot, and hates like everyone down there and does everything just to she's cynical to like high heaven. I get that bit, because what we also see here is, and Robert Jordan is unfortunately the kind of person who really believes in chosen leaders and whatnot, and like almost divine right monarchy, where like a king is a king because he has that sacred connection to the country and all of these things. And we know that Elaine is exactly that, because Elaine cares about people. Elaine tries to be a good ruler to the country, whereas all these others that we see are all fucking dickheads, right? They're like only about like how to get as much money out of it as possible, how to make everyone else grovel to them, and so forth. They just do it for their own personal amusement and enrichment and so forth. I see the idea behind, which is exactly that you have like actual good kings, your Aragorns and whatnot, where the ruler is actually the servant of the people, that kind of idea behind it. But the way he writes it is just so ridiculous, because it comes across as like, once again, so fucking stupid. Like, everyone in these books is so incredibly stupid. Same with all these Aes Sedai that are supposed to be highly intelligent, masters, mistresses of intrigue, and they think like kids on a fucking playground. That's not how you become a seat of a high house and contend for the throne through intrigue. You don't even reach that position by being this stupid and ignorant. That's just not how it works. And I don't know. I just really despise the way he does that, because it comes across as like, yeah, we have this one good person, which is Elaine, and everyone else out there has no real reason to be there except selfishness. None of them actually believe that they would be actually good kings or queens, which is like, why would you think that? And it's like, where's the nuance there? It's like, we have the right queen. That's Elaine. We know that because, by law, she's the right one because she's the heir of Queen Morghese, and she's also the only one who will ever do a good job. It's never the idea that you have like actual people out there that might be really good rulers for Andor. No, because we know they're evil, and we know they're evil because they're A, in the wrong, like law-wise, and B, they're also incompetent. We get to see that and feel that as brutally as possible, because once again, Robert Jordan is not a master of subtlety at fucking all. We also meet that old lord, what's his name, Nassim, whatever. That dude. And he's insane. So we get another big dose of Robert Jordan trying to write people with mental illness. And he fucking can't do it. It's just like, it annoys me so much that he has this like, look, people with mental illness, they are ridiculous. Let's make fun of them. Or they either don't know who they are or where they are and whatnot, or they hear voices. That's how mental illness works in these books. And we've already learned what to do with it, which is, euthanasia. But it just pisses me off so much that the depiction, like the unnecessary depiction of mental illness. That's the point there, right? With that lord, it's like, why have that character there? There's no reason to have that character there except for making fun of people with mental illness. Or, trying to once again humiliate a woman because he believes that he's deeply in love with, like, Leanne or whatever her name is, and that will embarrass her. Anyway, that's sort of what we learned there, plus there's intrigues between Lord Aramilla, not Aramilla, whatever their name is, and, those three ladies are all trying to backstab each other to become new queen. So we all know this will not end well because, intrigues and all of that. All of that stuff's always falling apart. It'll just take a while and we'll see what happens then. But frankly, it's so difficult to care because none of them have, good reasons. We get told that, they're all so stupid. And they think of each other as, oh, so stupid and vapid. It's like, that's not how it works. Either you have someone behind it plotting it all out, or those people are actually fairly smart, so why pretend? But yeah, we've already learned that Robert Jordan doesn't understand how intrigue works. He just thinks it's like you put two women in a room and let them talk, and then intrigue will just magically happen. Other side of that is a bit of walking around with our captain of the guard, Mellar, who has another name, David something, who's obviously a dark friend, and he kills someone, and maybe it's important, or maybe it was just a thief. We learned that the dark friend lady in Camelin is building on arson, is doing arson stuff. Why exactly is kind of, I don't know. Possibly there's a plan behind it. Maybe bad people just like to set stuff on fire. Which I personally get. I like to, burn shit. It's fun. But I'd like to have a bit more, behind it. Anyway, they just do the usual being evil people being evil kind of thing. And I don't, who cares? It's so annoying that up to this point, I still have not seen any reasonably, compelling a bad person in this book, any reasonable reasonably compelling antagonist except Padan Fane, and that's saying something. If the only reasonably interesting bad guy is Padan Fane, and the rest is just boring. Yeah, it's just boring. Who cares? I mean, really, who cares? So let's look at Egwene and see what's going on there. Egwene is sitting outside of Tar Valon, and yeah, Tar Valon is, they're sort of besieging it, and it's going nowhere, and people are, both sides are building armies, and there's probably something going to happen at some point, but they're also all worried about what's going on with the whole, big magic thing. But it all feels rather like pointless again. And this is like the big thing with all the Aes Sedai, right? It's like, what are Aes Sedai actually doing? It's like a big question that so far Robert Jordan has not answered in any meaningful way. It's like, what do Aes Sedai actually want? Do they want to be left alone? It said like they rule everything and have like all the thrones dancing to their strings. It's like there's no motive behind it. They never do anything. They just like, I don't know, intrigue around each other because they're fucking bored, maybe? I don't know. There's never anything like, why do we want to do this actually? I mean, yeah, apparently Elida is not allowed to sit on the White Tower because this will absolutely be a disaster. But maybe it's also just because some people are personally slighted. There's never any no long-term goals, plans, or anything. The Aes Sedai don't even have like any form of mission statement. Which, once again, I've said this before. It's like, right, Bene Gesserit want to create the Kwisatz Haderach. Now they find out that was a really stupid idea when it happens, but that's not the point. Like, they have a plan. They have an ongoing idea of what they want to do. Sort of. At least in the first couple of Dune novels, for example. But the Aes Sedai, they have like nothing. They just like do whatever the fuck they want, but are also apparently all-powerful. And it's once again this idea that Robert Jordan manages to tell us things and then show us and never backs it up with anything like within the novel. Like the statements he makes about these kind of things feel empty and hollow. And that's just not good enough for like a long-term book. I can live with that in like a short story when I don't have like, when I accept that we don't get like, enough space to explain everything, but we're like 10 books in, man. You could maybe drop some hints or whatever. Anyway, point is, they're all, don't know exactly how to get into Tar Valon without killing a ton of people, which they don't want to do. And then someone comes up with the idea like, maybe we could negotiate with Elida to find out what's going on. That comes from another one of those Aes Sedai with A's in her name that is obviously evil because she's supposedly the boss of Halima, who we know is Asangar, who we know is the other dude that's not Aginor that got killed in book 1 and then reincarnated as a woman and is behaving, we already spoke about that part. Anyway, so we know she's also Black Aja, and she's like, I've heard that people are planning to negotiate, and then maybe she wants to achieve something with it, but what we all get at the end of the day is like, everyone's like, that's a really stupid idea, and then Egwene is like, well, let's do it anyway. But let's just use it to actually string them along until we have like a better idea to do whatever the fuck we want to actually do. Also find out what happened there where people were doing lots of magics back and we still don't know why. The rest of it is once again, just like telling us how complicated everything is without ever giving us actual reasons or anything. And I'm like, yeah, well, maybe we'll get more information later in these chapters, but this is where we stop for today. So at the end of the day, yeah, it's nice to also check in with Egwene, see where they are right now, see how things will continue from there. And the large problem that I was trying to address today is like how a lot of the things that Robert Jordan tells us are in a specific way. He then neglects to show us why they are like how they really are in that way, and the things he shows us in chapters contradict. Plus, the idea of like actual rightful true kings and how they behave and whatnot being something of, a bit of a romantic notion, I guess. And well, yeah, the stupidity about not Egwene, Elaine's kids and the wrong thing there. If you got all those, it was still, it's still not Lord of Chaos, so I'm okay with it. And we'll see where this stuff will go in the future, I guess, tomorrow. So yeah, have a great day, and I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.